Welcome back. It was a crime which pushed everything else off the front pages. 3 men, all known criminals, found shot dead in the Essex countryside. It was a cold-blooded, professional killing. The victims had many enemies, but which one wanted them executed?
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. Okay, now this video is going to address some questions that I'm asked on a very frequent basis. Do I believe in the Billy Jasper theory? Do I believe that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were killed at around midnight? Now, many of you will know that TMI, a team of former detectives, is working on the case in the background, and they seem adamant in the Billy Jasper theory being the truth. They believe that they were killed around midnight. So I'm going to discuss my own personal thoughts and feelings on how likely I believe that to be. For me, personally, the best place to start with this is by actually removing all of the noise for one moment. That's removing the Billy Jasper statement, removing the Billy Jasper audio, removing the statement of hearing the gunshots at around midnight, and actually just focusing on what we actually know, what we can see with our own eyes in front of us, as in the crime scene, the 3 individuals, and the location of where this crime was committed. That is the starting point to figure out exactly what took place. Now, a lot of people will say, well, there's a statement of someone hearing gunshots at midnight. But then equally, I could say to you, there's also statements that exist of someone hearing gunshots around 6 o'clock or 7:45. There's conflicting reports on the evening of December the 6th of when gunshots were heard in that area. And bearing in mind that gunshots, shotgun shoots, all of that sort of stuff was commonplace in that location. So let's start with what we do know. Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were most likely killed on a Wednesday the 6th of December, 1995. So from here, we need to look at what the normal comings and goings were of White House Farm and Workhouse Lane on a basic average Wednesday afternoon, early evening. I believe that this actually ties in with why they were killed on a Wednesday and the location itself, why this specific location was chosen. To give you some idea of this, we need to look at the statement given by William Theobald, the brother of the farmer who discovered the bodies. It's in his statement that he states the following. The following police statement was given by William Theobald on the 11th of December 1995. He states the following. I am married and have 2 children aged 30 and 23 years old. I own half of the land at White House Farm and the bungalow called Rowins, which is adjacent to the farm on the main A130, Main Road, Rettendon. There is approximately 11.5 acres of land attached to Rowins property. About 12 years ago, I joined Progress House Gym, which is in Castle Lane, Hadley, Essex. I used the gym for the purposes of bodybuilding. During this time, I met another user of the gym called Tony Tucker. I have trained with Tony in the past. I've collected him from his house to take him training. I would say in those days I regarded Tony as a friend. When I knew Tony, he was a carpenter living with his wife and I believe 2 children in Rayleigh, Essex. I cannot remember the address. I'm also aware that Tony worked for Nigel Benn, the boxer, and was controlling doorman for various clubs and at one time had a shop in Romford selling bodybuilding equipment. He either owned this shop or was the manager. I remember whenever Nigel Benn was boxing, Tony would lead him into the boxing ring. Tony left his wife and drifted away onto other things. I have heard that he became involved in the drug scene, although I have never had any personal contact with drugs or ever seen Tony with them. I haven't seen Tony for about 10 years to actually speak to, although about 5 years ago I did pass him on the road in Hadley. We acknowledged one another and then went on our own way. I believe Tony was driving a convertible XJS Jaguar. I'm still a member of the Progress Gym. I go at least once a week, but I've never seen Tony training. Since those early years, I cannot recall Tony ever visiting my home address or the farm. I've lived here for 30 years, but I'm sure he would know where I lived. Another friend who I've trained with in the past is Paul Wheatley. Paul was friendly with Tony Tucker. I was Paul's best man at his wedding. Paul has visited my home on many occasions, and I would have assumed that he would have told Tony where I lived. I am also aware of a person called Pat Tate. I may have unknowingly met Tate at the gym, but I have friends on Canvey Island who had their car stolen by this man. I am also aware of the name Tate through car dealer contacts again in the Canvey area. I have never been officially introduced to this man, and I am not aware of Tate ever visiting my home or White House farm. Both my brother Peter and I are competent sporting shooting enthusiasts. We have both shot for England and have been able to introduce this facet of our sport into our livelihood. We run White House Farm Shooting Ground, which is as follows. The farm has a lake which is used for duck decoy and fishing. I run the shooting ground, which is separate from the farm and contained in the 11.5 acres of Rowan's land. This is a private ground which I supervise and run to give tuition and have a down-the-line and compact sporting setup. The shooting ground is set up for sporting smooth-bore shotguns. I also have an arrangement where I can supply shotgun cartridges to my customers. I currently stock two types of cartridge. They are the Express 24g 7.5 colour mauve and the Champion range from Kent Cartridges size 7.5 colour red. It is not uncommon for people who use my shooting ground to bring their own cartridges. Okay, so now we get to the most important part of this statement. Do remember the following. I currently only shoot on a Wednesday up to around 18:30 hours. On Wednesday, the 6th of the 12th 95, the shooting stopped when it became too dark. I estimate the last shots were fired around 15:45 hours. I do have lighting facilities to allow us to shoot after dark, but on the above date it was getting cold and the last visitor had an interest in our lakes, so we went on to discuss my pond which is beside my home. I am obviously aware of the shooting incident which occurred on our land just off of Workhouse Lane, and the last time I visited this area was on Monday the 4th of December when I walked across the land and up to Rettendon Hall at around 8 AM when I had a job to do for Mr. Foe, the occupier. At this present time I have 3 over-under 12-bore shotguns and 2 rifles. Should the police wish to inspect these guns, I am prepared to hand them over. I should also say that having finished shooting on Wednesday afternoon on the 6th of the 12th, I remained at my home address all evening. I did not hear or see anything unusual. Okay, now for me this tells us everything that we need to know as to why Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were down the lane shortly before 7 PM. They only shot there on a Wednesday. The sound of shotgun fire was heard on a Wednesday up until around 18:30 hours or 6:30 PM. The prosecution believed that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were killed shortly before 7 PM. To me, this makes perfect sense. This location hasn't just been plucked out of the air, out of thin air. This hasn't just been arranged at the last minute. They had to be killed on a Wednesday just after the shoot would normally finish. And you might ask yourself, well, why? Well, quite obviously, to blend in with the normal surroundings of an everyday Wednesday at White House Farm. Now, when I say blend in with the surrounding area, I mean the sound of shotgun fire. I mean, coincidence theorists would love you to believe that there's absolutely no connection at all with the fact that they are killed with a shotgun, yet in close proximity of that Range Rover and of the murders is a shooting range using shotguns. Now, you can see in front of you here the sort of map of the location. You have the Range Rover, you've got the shooting range by White House Farm and the lane entrance. To me, this crime has been very, very well thought out. They knew that they could lure Tucker, Tate and Rolfe off of the main road down to Workhouse Lane, where they would meet the locked 5-bar gate. But also by using Workhouse Lane, they didn't have to worry about anyone exiting from the shooting range shortly after 6 PM. Even if they'd have shot a little bit later in the evening, no one from that shooting range would have driven down Workhouse Lane. For me personally, by using Workhouse Lane and the locked 5-bar gate in terms of trapping Tucker, Tate and Rolfe actually makes perfect sense. It also negates, as I just said there, the concern of anyone from the shooting range accidentally stumbling across the murder in progress. The shooting range is further along the road, just off that main road there, by White House Farm. So you would hear the sound of gunshots in the locality, in that local area, but you wouldn't actually stumble across that murder in progress. The only person who may have stumbled across that is someone looking out of Rettendon Hall. Now, what also tells me that this was very well thought out and very well planned is the fact that the farmer who uses Workhouse Lane would go down there once in the morning and once in the afternoon to feed the pheasants. Now, to add more credibility to the fact that this was very meticulously planned, we only have to look at the statement given by Peter Theobald, the man who found the Range Rover, or one of those individuals, I should say, who found the Range Rover on the morning of December the 7th. It's in his police statement that he states the following. The last time I personally went to these fields would have been around 1600 hours on the evening of Tuesday the 5th of December, as Ken would have fed the ducks on Wednesday evening and the pheasants on Wednesday morning. So if we go by this guide here, that they would go and normally feed the pheasants around 1600 hours, they'd go through the locked 5-bar gate, leave it open most likely, and come back through at say 5 p.m, did the killer or killers actually know this? Did they know that at some point in time the gate is open, but it's also locked around 5 p.m, and no other visitors would be using that lane after that time? Further information regarding that comes in the form of the summing up in court given by the judge during the trial. It's here that he states the following. The gate was normally locked during the shooting season, which was from mid-July to the end of February, in order to deter poachers. On the 6th of December 1995, Mr. Jiggins went about 4 in the afternoon to feed the pheasants and the ducks, but he only fed the ducks as it was too late for the pheasants. He drove back through the gate and locked the gate at around 5 p.m. So when we combine the fact that there's a shooting range there that only shoots on a Wednesday up until around 6:30 p.m, and the last visitor through the locked 5-bar gate comes back through at around 5 p.m, to me the time of death at just before 7 makes a lot of logical sense. But now we move on to exactly what were their plans for that night in terms of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, as they had a restaurant booking for 8:30 p.m. on that evening. The following police statement is from Gary Jackets, dated the 8th of December 1995. I am the operations manager of the Global Caf. The company title is First Continental. The Global Caf Romford is situated in South Street. The caf has been open for about 8 weeks. Since the caf has been open, I have seen a man I know as Tony Tucker in the caf about 2 or 3 times per week. I have known Tony on a casual basis for the last 8 years. I have been associated with various entertainment establishments in Essex that Tony has frequented, and I've come to know him a little better over the last 18 months. Tony was a very valuable customer and was never reluctant to spend money. He was always very polite to the staff, who used to fight to serve him due to the tips he would give. He would always turn up for bookings, but if he couldn't make it, he would always let us know. He seemed to call mostly on a mobile phone, but was quite hard to get hold of if you needed to contact him. I believe that Tony booked a table for 4 persons, phoning on Monday the 4th of December, but I do not know who took the booking. Around 1 p.m. the next day I came into the caf and I was in a bit of a hurry and went past all the tables without seeing Tony. He came up behind me and tapped me on the shoulder and said hello. I apologised for not having seen him. He told me he had seen me the following night as he had a table booked for 8:30 p.m. His food was then served and he returned to the table, and I could see he was in the company of a young girl about 19 to 20 years old. She had long dark hair and I believe she was wearing a brown jumper. I did not see them again as I then went about my business. For the whole period the caf has been open, Tony has supplied the doorman for every night of the week. Tony deals direct with our head office, situated at 198 Victoria Road, Romford, Essex. He then pays the doorman. Sometime shortly before 7 p.m. on Wednesday the 6th of December, I cannot be sure of the time, Tony phoned the caf and stated that he wished to increase the booking from 4 persons to 6 for the 8:30 p.m. booking. I told him that was not a problem. We said goodbye and I did not hear from him again. During Wednesday evening, I was busy at the restaurant. I was aware that Tony and his party had not turned up as booked. At 10:30, we closed the restaurant. Hollywood's and the cafe are owned by the same company. When I spoke to Tony on Tuesday at the cafe and on the phone on Wednesday, he just seemed to be his normal chirpy self. So what can we take from that statement there? Clearly, this is someone who knew Tony Tucker fairly well over a period of months. And what's interesting and I guess most reliable about this man's statement is the fact that Tony always rang up and cancelled if he couldn't make a booking. So why would he call up shortly before 7 p.m. on the Wednesday to increase that booking size from 4 to 6 persons if they were actually never going to attend? Why did Tucker actually not even cancel the booking if they planned to be driving around until midnight? It doesn't make any logical sense. Surely we can only go by the normal comings and goings of a Wednesday evening. Surely that's the starting point here. If Tony has never, ever not turned up for a booking, he's always called up to cancel, and then he's increasing that booking size just before 7 p.m. from 4 to 6 persons, surely that tells you he's going to be turning up for the meal at 8:30 p.m. Therefore, he doesn't, they all fall radio silent, and yet we're still supposed to believe that they're somehow alive. Then we look at the mobile phone usage. There'll be people that say, well, there's calls that weren't disclosed, blah, 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 after 7 p.m. potentially. But then my comeback to that would be, why has no one who knows Tucker, Tate and Rolfe come forward and said, hang on a minute, they couldn't have been dead at 7 o'clock because I spoke to them at 9 p.m. Not one of their close friends, not one of their close family members has come forward to say, I spoke to these individuals after 7 p.m. Not one individual. There may be a couple of eyewitness accounts of them sitting in a pub potentially somewhere or driving around the roundabout, but these eyewitness accounts are sparse and uncorroborated. They don't really mean anything. If Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were driving around in the Range Rover from 7 p.m. till midnight, then do you not think that we'd have a handful at least of credible eyewitness accounts seeing these very distinct individuals driving the blue Range Rover? But simply, we don't. Back to the mobile phone usage again for one moment. These were busy individuals. You only have to look at the voicemails, 20 to 30 voicemails in a 24-hour period. There were people out there who were trying to get hold of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, particularly Tucker and Tate. Yet we're somehow supposed to believe that they didn't answer their phones at all after 7 p.m. They were driving around, they were doing God knows what. They were going down the lane, coming out of the lane, driving around, having a drink down the pub. There's nothing to substantiate this whatsoever. There just isn't. One eyewitness account, even if it's 2 or 3 people saying the same thing, it's one account. Surely if these individuals were driving around, then there would be a lot more than just one account of seeing that Range Rover on the night of December the 6th after 7 p.m. We don't have any eyewitness accounts of a Range Rover driving down the lane at midnight. We don't have any eyewitness accounts of the Range Rover driving down the lane at 7 o'clock and then exiting the lane again. We don't have any eyewitness accounts which describes those events. Now, equally, you could say, well, they didn't answer their phone. Yet, Tucker and Tate are found with their mobile phones clasped firmly in their hands. Are we supposed to believe, really, honestly, are we supposed to believe that from 7 p.m. till midnight there's this kind of blank area, I guess, where we don't know where they are, we don't know what they're doing, nobody can reach them, and no one who knows them has seen them or heard from them since 7 o'clock. Yet we're supposed to believe that they're alive and then killed shortly after midnight. To me, it just doesn't make any logical sense. Now, bearing in mind, this is only my own personal opinion, my own personal viewpoint, but when you put the pieces of this puzzle together, it makes logical sense, at least from my perspective. The Range Rover is driven down to the locked 5-bar gate. The farmers last used that gate quite frequently around 4 or 5 p.m. of an evening. This Workhouse Lane White House farm also has a shooting range. They only shoot on a Wednesday. Tucker, Tate and Rolfe are killed on a Wednesday. That shoot normally takes place up until around 6:30 p.m. of an evening. the shooting range is not directly connected to Workhouse Lane. So what better place to lure Tucker, Tate and Rolfe up to a locked 5-bar gate than to drive them down Workhouse Lane shortly after the sound of gunfire would normally cease. By choosing Workhouse Lane, by choosing to drive them up to the locked 5-bar gate, which these individuals would have known would be locked, they would have known that there was no escape for Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, and these sounds would blend in with the normal comings and goings of a Wednesday night. This was a cold, dark and snowy evening in December 1995. The shooting would have normally, and it's important to remember that word, it would have normally stopped at around 6:30. What better time to commit the murder than around 7 o'clock or shortly before that time period? There is no link to the shooting range down to Workhouse Lane, so there would be no concern of the people from the shooting range leaving the shooting range and somehow stumbling across the murder in progress. This was a very well thought out crime. This was not just plucked out of thin air at the very last moment. This has been thought through meticulously. Now, when we go back to the eyewitness account, which heard gunshots at around midnight, which is somehow being tied into this Billy Jasper theory, I don't even think what he describes is particularly what we're looking for, to be perfectly honest. He describes a fusillade of shots. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what a fusillade is, it's a series of shots fired or missiles thrown in quick succession. It's a volley, a barrage, a bombardment of gunfire. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for 3 quick shots, and then once he's incapacitated Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, he then starts walking around the vehicle and firing the kill shots into these individuals. This wasn't a bang, 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 bang. This wasn't like some bloody, maniac with a shotgun. This was very clinical, very quick, but certainly not a barrage of gunfire. It would be 3 shots fired in quick succession, followed by the gunman walking around the vehicle and executing Tucker, Tate and Rolfe with the kill shots behind the ear. A fusillade to me doesn't actually describe what we're looking for in terms of the murder. Now, as I've said in previous videos, I don't even put much stock into this eyewitness account, into this police statement. There's other statements which exist, which talk about gunfire at around 5 p.m, 6 p.m, 7:30. There's quite a few different statements out there which describe gunfire being heard at different times, and I cannot stress this enough to the viewers at home. If you live in an area where something takes place on a regular occurrence, on a regular day, it does not register in your mind necessarily that something is taking place. If you hear gunfire on a Wednesday, every Wednesday you hear gunfire. Your brain is not trained to listen out for that gunfire every time it takes place. Now, as silly as this may sound, and I've discussed this yet again in a previous video, but my nan's house, and this might sound bizarre to you, but just hear me out for a moment. My nan's house, right, backs on to the Central Line. You have trains going up and down there from 5 a.m. in the morning till way gone midnight. Your brain does not register every train that flies past the back of her garden. And you can imagine how loud it is. You do hear it. Of course you hear it, but you don't register every time that train goes past. That's why you're not getting loads of people come forward and saying, I heard gunshots at 7 o'clock. It was really weird. Gunshots aren't common around here, but I definitely heard gunshots. It wasn't something that stuck out. You become programmed and used to certain sounds occurring, where you live, basically. Whether that's gunfire, whether that's a train, whether that's the sound of sirens, your brain becomes used to those familiar sounds. In a way, I guess you become desensitized. You become desensitized to familiar sounds. So to me, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that no one has really come forward and said, yeah, I heard 3 shots, then I heard 1 shot after another being fired afterwards. It was really bizarre. To me, that's not uncommon because they hear this sound all of the time. They would have heard it, but they won't register exactly when they've heard that particular sound because it's commonplace. It's something that happens every Wednesday there at White House Farm. One final thing that I wish to address before we close this video is I know that some people will say, oh, you don't want to know who done it. It doesn't serve your channel to know who did it. If it's Billy Jasper, then the videos will cease to be made. And to be perfectly honest, that couldn't be any further from the truth. If it did actually turn out to be correct, that Billy Jasper's story is the truth and that they were killed around midnight, it would actually open up the case for me in a lot of ways. Why or how did the police set up Steele and Wombs? Why was Nichols there that night? There's probably another 200 or 300 videos that I could make on this case if the Billy Jasper theory did actually turn out to be true. But I have to be honest to my viewers, I have to be honest to myself and just say that I just don't believe it. I do not believe that they were killed at around midnight. If you can put in the comment section below why you believe they may have been killed around midnight, we can open that up for discussion. And as always, many thanks for joining me for this particular video. Very shortly you'll be able to see some other videos from the channel, including the Essex Boys playlist, which has all the videos concerning this case in one convenient folder. Many thanks for joining me for this one. I'll see you all again in the next one. Take care, guys. Cheers.